So I can remember when we were growing up as kids on holiday weekends like this, one of our favorite things to do was to get out in the yard with all of our other friends and our cousins and play tackle football. As a matter of fact, I even played some Mighty Might football when I was like 8 and 9 years old growing up. But I remember one of the things I hated the most about playing football, especially tackle football, was if I was ever running the ball, I would get tackled. And as little kids tend to do, everybody would pile on the person with the football that was running the ball. As a matter of fact, we even played a game called Tackle the Man with a Football. And everybody would pile on. Now, that sounds kind of fun as a kid, but in reality, when I was the kid at the bottom of the pile, man, I didn't like it because I felt confined. I felt like I was just trapped. Like I didn't really have many of those moments growing up, but when I had those moments, it kind of put me in a state of panic. As a matter of fact, as a kid, we went to a place many of you guys have heard of, if not everybody's heard of, called Ruby Falls. And they have a place in Ruby Falls when you're going down into this cave called Fat Man Squeeze. And when I was a kid, that wasn't such a big deal. But when I went back as an adult, all of a sudden I had that same feeling of being on the bottom of that pile of kids. And it was just kind of like, oh no, the walls are closing in on me. The place around me is getting smaller. The roof is getting lower. And it's like I would go into this state of panic. And when I felt like this, I felt so confined that I didn't know what to do, and my mind wouldn't think straight. It would put me in a place to where I felt like I had to move around. Maybe you can relate to this. Like you just almost feel like you start panicking and you start wailing and flailing and doing everything that you can to get away just so that you can breathe again. Because I can remember when we were walking through Ruby Falls as an adult and I got to the place where it opened up, it was almost like I went, even a couple of breaths. It took a couple of breaths. Or when all the kids would pile off of me and I would finally, okay, I'm all right. Or when I was playing Mighty Might football and the referees would be pulling the kids off of the person on the bottom, which typically was me. In those moments when I was feeling that way, obviously, they would pull these kids off of me and I would stand up and I would try to play it cool then because all the other kids were looking at me. But it was just like this strange feeling. It's this feeling of just being compressed and confined. And really, to be honest, it felt like I was trapped. And when I would panic, I would feel like there was no control over my body. Like I was starting to just do everything I could to get out of that corner, to get out from underneath that pile, to get out from underneath the pressure that situation was putting on me. And all of a sudden, my whole body would fill up with fear, a fear of what could be. Could I suffocate? Are they ever going to get off of me? Will I ever get out of this cave? As a matter of fact, there's another story that I'll share with you really quick. When I was in my early 20s, I got in a car accident and I ran a tractor-trailer truck pulled out in front of me. And my truck, I had to slam on the brakes and I ran into that truck. And when I did, the trailer hit the top of the cab of my truck and it bent it down to where it kind of kept the side door from opening up and the windshield fell on top of me and I couldn't move. And I felt trapped. And all I could think about was something fearful. All the fearful things went through my head. Is there gas leaking? I can't reach up to cut off the truck? And all of these things started going through my head of what could happen, what could be, because that's what happens when we start to panic. We feel like we can't breathe. We start feeling like the walls are closing in around us. We feel like that we start panicking to the point of fear taking over. And that's a dangerous, dangerous place to be. But in reality, this is what happens in life, isn't it? We become so pressured by life that we feel like that we can't breathe. Listen, I don't want to take too much of your time this holiday weekend. Man, we take this weekend to be online only on purpose so that you can be with your friends and you can be with your family. But I just wanted to introduce an idea that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks that I think is going to be beneficial for us just to be able to talk about, that it'll actually give us an opportunity to breathe, because I feel like many of us are dealing with some of these same issues and some of these same problems. We need some breathing room because we're starting to feel like that we're suffocating, because this is life. And we start putting ourselves in pressured situations, or we get put into pressured situations, and then we feel like the walls are closing in around us, and we feel like the roof is coming down on us, and then we feel like we can't breathe, and all of a sudden we start to panic because we don't know what the answers are to be able to get out of that situation, and the next thing you know, we feel we're full up of fear, and the next thing you know, we feel full of anxiety, and then we become depressed. As a matter of fact, statistics say that right now we're dealing with more anxiety and more depression than we ever have before. And we're going to talk through some of that over the course of the next few weeks. But I want to talk to you about this subject of breathing room. Breathing room. Because when all of this happens, when we start feeling pressured and we start feeling trapped, our outlook on life begins to change. For me, I become very negative, and I feel like I'm defeated. Like I'll start kind of having these bad thoughts go through my head about myself, or I'll start kind of talking down to myself. Maybe you can relate to some of that. You start getting put in a pressured situation. You don't know the answer. You don't know how you're going to get out of this financial situation. You don't know how you're going to get out of this relationship. You don't know if this marriage will ever get any better. You don't know if your teenagers will ever respect you. You don't know if your parents will ever respect you as an adult or as a teenager. Like you start getting put in all of these pressured situations. Your job's getting a little bit harder. And you feel like you can't breathe. You feel trapped. And all of a sudden the anxiety sets in. And the fear sets in. And you would give anything for those things to come off of the top of you. They would roll off so you could just stand up, or you could get out of that tight spot and you could just breathe. If you could just breathe. It's as if I'm dealing, when I'm in those moments, with a ton of anxiety in my life. And the truth is, all of it really boils down that we are one of two people, right? You are one of two people. I am one of two people. We are either people who love to plan, or we're either people who don't plan at all. And if you're one of those people that love to plan, you frustrate all of us people who don't really do good at planning because you're so good at it. But here's what happens in our life. If we love to plan, what we tend to do is we plan so much that there is no breathing room. And all of a sudden your life becomes full of pressure of all the things that you have to do, and the things that you got to, or the appointments you got to make it to, or the planned vacations that you got to go on to, or that's what you're working towards. And we have all of these things that we're working towards that we plan for ourselves, but yet they become pressure on us, and it creates anxiety, which can turn into depression and just kind of feeling down or fearful, or put us in a panic mode. Or we're one of the other person to where we don't plan at all, and we're the type of people who are running around frustrated because we feel like that there's always a bunch going on, but it's because we don't take time to plan anything, or someone plans our lives for us, which makes more pressure come on us and makes us feel more confined and more trapped. And all of a sudden we feel this overwhelming feeling of fear and anxiety. And this anxiety begins to set in, and it really starts causing an issue. I want to give you an overarching verse that's going to be a part of this series, Breathing Room. It's in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7, and it says this: Be anxious for nothing. Be anxious for nothing. But in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Even the tone of that sentence makes it more calm, seems more calm than being anxious. That, don't worry about anything. But through prayer and supplication, let your requests be known to God. Verse 7, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds through Christ Jesus. Wouldn't that be amazing? If we got to the point to where we didn't feel trapped, we didn't feel overwhelmed, we didn't feel pressured, and then all of a sudden we found that peace that only God could offer. And even in those moments where we feel like all the kids were piling on top of us and we feel trapped, or we're squeezed in between the fat man squeeze, that we're calm enough through prayer and supplication to make our requests known to God. And then we depend on Him to give us the peace. What would happen if we did that? What would our lives look like if we were better at creating breathing room? What would it look like for you? What would it look like for me? What would it look like for our families? If instead of scheduling something every minute of every day, instead of moving around so much to where we don't even know where we're going, we're running around like a chicken with our head cut off, in a season like this, at the end of a school year, if you have kids, going into summer, if we didn't feel like we constantly had to go, what would it look like in your life if you had some breathing room? If you were able to step away just for a moment and you were able to go, I don't know about you, but there's not many places I go without my phone. And I feel like anytime I have my phone, that I'm accessible, which I think can be a good thing. But I also think that it can be a very harmful thing. That I always feel like I've got something in front of me that can either entertain me. I always find myself checking my phone all the time. Sometimes I almost feel like that my phone vibrates in my pocket and it didn't really even vibrate. Maybe you've experienced something like that. And it's like we check it nonstop. It's this habit that we've gotten to where we almost hope that something comes up, or we're almost hoping that it goes off, or maybe we're hoping it doesn't go off, but it's always going off all the time, and we start to feel trapped. I rode up to visit a lady the other day, and when I drove up into her driveway, she was sitting out in her carport, and she was just sitting there outside, which is something they used to do. Some people still do it occasionally. She wasn't looking at a phone. She wasn't looking at a tablet. She didn't have a TV outside. She was just sitting outside. I think she had a glass of tea, and she was sitting outside. And I thought to myself when I drove up, this is kind of sad, but I thought to myself when I drove up, what's she doing? Man, that's weird. But when I stepped out to visit with her, we began to talk just for a few minutes, and I realized this is kind of nice. No other agenda, just sitting and just talking. Just a little bit of breathing room. So I wonder what your life would look like if you had just a little bit more breathing room. Over the course of this holiday, as we celebrate, remember the ones who fought for our freedom, to give us the opportunity for us to have breathing room, I hope we'll take advantage of it. I hope we'll consider that maybe we've scheduled ourselves into a corner. Or maybe that we have the power to overcome some of the busyness that's in our lives so that we can get rid of some of the stress and we can get rid of some of the anxiety. So let me just tell you this, and let me just give you an invitation before I let you go. If you're dealing with any type of anxiety, if you're dealing with any type of pressure or feeling trapped, be a part of this series, Breathing Room. Over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to discuss this idea of letting our requests be known to God. We're going to look at other parts of Scripture to where it talks about this idea of getting rid of the anxiety in our life, because I promise you, God has not built us to be the type of people who places and just almost welcomes in anxiety in our lives. He actually wants us and has designed us for breathing room. So make sure you're here next Sunday, 10:30, on site or online, so that we can start our discussion as we move forward in this. And over the course of this next week, I want to challenge you just to pray, God, help me to find my breathing room. We love you guys, and we'll see you next week.